At 72, she was thrown out with $2. What she found behind one locked door changed everything. The grocery bag tore before she realized she'd let go. Cans rolled across the curb. The door behind her closed without a word. Evelyn Mercer stood there, 72 years old, with $2 crumpled in her pocket, and nowhere to go. By nightfall, she would be on a bus heading toward a place she hadn't seen in decades, and a door she was never meant to open. If you were in her place with nothing left, where would you go first? The grocery bag tore before she realized she'd let go of it. One handle snapped clean through, the thin plastic stretching for a second, then giving way. A can rolled out first, then another. They clinked softly against the curb and settled near the storm drain, rocking once before going still. Evelyn Mercer stood there, one hand still half curled, as if it were holding something that wasn't there anymore. The pill bottle slipped next. It hit the pavement with a hollow sound, spun once and stopped near her shoe. She didn't bend down right away. Behind her, the door clicked shut. Not slammed, not angry, just closed. The kind of quiet closure that didn't invite questions. From inside, a television kept playing, some daytime program. Laughter, too bright, too loud, leaked faintly through the walls. A laugh track, she thought, the kind that tells you when something is supposed to be funny. Evelyn turned her head slightly, not enough to look back, just enough to know the door wasn't opening again. She waited anyway. A few seconds, maybe longer. Long enough for the cold air to settle into her coat sleeves. Long enough for the feeling in her chest to shift from confusion into something steadier, something heavier. Still, the door stayed closed. She looked down at her hands. Empty. Then slowly, she checked her coat pocket. Her fingers moved carefully, as if she might disturb something fragile. They found 2 folded bills, soft from use, crumpled along the edges. She pulled them out, smoothed them against her palm. $2. That was it. No wallet, no keys, no phone. She patted the other pocket, then the inside lining. Nothing. The street around her went on like it always did. A car passed, tires whispering against damp asphalt. Someone across the way dragged a trash bin up a driveway, the plastic wheels rattling against the concrete. A dog barked once from somewhere behind a fence. Normal sounds. Uninterrupted. Evelyn stood on the curb outside her son's townhouse in Tacoma, Washington, holding $2 and looking at the pieces of her afternoon scattered at her feet. She bent down slowly. Her knees made that small, familiar protest, the one she usually ignored. Today it sounded louder. She picked up the pill bottle first, checked the cap. Still sealed. Good. She slipped it into her pocket, the one that still held the 2 bills. Then she gathered what she could from the ground. 1 can, then the other. A box of crackers that had come open at the corner. She tried to lift the torn grocery bag, but it sagged uselessly in her hand, the split widening as soon as she put weight on it. She adjusted. Tucked the cans under her arm instead, held the box carefully against her chest. It would do for now. When she straightened, she noticed movement across the street. A man stood near his mailbox, flipping through envelopes. He glanced up briefly, his eyes landing on her for less than a second. Then he looked back down again, as if he'd forgotten what he saw before it fully registered. Not unkind, just uninterested. A woman passed on the sidewalk, walking a small white dog. The dog tugged slightly at the leash, nose low to the ground, curious about something near the curb. The woman gave it a gentle pull and kept moving. She didn't look at Evelyn. Or if she did, she didn't let it show. Evelyn stood there a moment longer, waiting maybe for something to interrupt the quiet, for someone to ask a question, for the door behind her to open with a change of mind, a correction. Nothing came. The television inside continued laughing. She shifted the cans in her arm, adjusted her grip on the box. Then, without turning around, she stepped off the curb. One foot first, then the other. The pavement felt uneven beneath her shoes. Not dangerous, just unfamiliar, as if she were noticing it for the first time. She didn't have a destination. That was the part she understood clearly. No plan waiting somewhere just beyond the next block. No place she was expected to be. Only the street in front of her, so she followed it. Past the neighbor's driveway. Past the mailbox where the man still sorted through his envelopes. Past the edge of the property where the sidewalk cracked slightly near a patch of weeds. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves and distant rain, the kind that had already passed through but left its trace behind. Evelyn kept walking. Her steps were careful, measured, the way they had always been. Nothing hurried, nothing dramatic. Just forward. At the corner, she paused. Not because she needed to. Because it felt like a place where people usually paused. She looked left, then right. Traffic was light. A car approached in the distance, slowing as it neared the intersection. She crossed before it arrived. Halfway across, she felt the weight of the $2 in her pocket again. A small, pressing awareness. She pressed her hand lightly against the fabric. Still there. She didn't know why that mattered, only that it did. On the other side, she kept moving. The townhouse row faded behind her. The street widened slightly, leading toward a busier road a few blocks ahead. She could hear it now. Engines, brakes, the low hum of movement. Something steadier than the quiet she'd left. Evelyn walked toward that sound. Not because she had decided anything, just because standing still wasn't an option anymore. And after a while, the house behind her, the door, the television, the life that had once included her, slipped out of sight. She didn't look back to see when it happened. She just kept going. The sidewalk dipped slightly as it met the wider road ahead. Traffic moved steadily now, cars lined up at a light, engines idling. The faint hiss of tires on damp pavement. The sound wrapped around her, louder than the quiet street she had left behind, but somehow easier to stand inside. Evelyn adjusted the cans in her arm. The cardboard box pressed into her coat. It was beginning to soften where her fingers held it. She shifted her grip again, careful not to let it split the way the bag had. A city bus passed her, close enough that she felt the push of air against her side. The doors opened at the corner stop just ahead. A few people stepped off. 2 teenagers with backpacks, a woman talking into her phone, a man in a construction jacket who didn't look up as he walked past. Evelyn slowed, not stopping, just slowing. The bus sat there, engine humming. She watched it for a moment longer than she meant to. Then she moved past it. Her steps were steady, but her mind had begun to drift somewhere else entirely. Not forward. Back. Fragments came first, not whole memories, just pieces. A narrow hallway with a coat rack that leaned slightly to the left. The smell of antiseptic and mint from the dental office where she had worked for nearly 30 years. The steady rhythm of a suction hose. The low murmur of patients trying to make small talk through numb mouths. She had been good at that job. Careful, precise. She remembered correcting charts quietly, fixing small errors before they became problems. No one had asked her to do it. She just noticed things, details others skipped past. It made the day go smoother. That had always been enough. Her shoes tapped lightly against the concrete as she walked. The sound fell into rhythm with her thoughts. There had been a house once, a small one, nothing fancy. A kitchen window that stuck in the summer, a back fence that needed repainting every other year, the kind of place where things wore down slowly, predictably. Her husband had taken care of most of it, not in a controlling way, just naturally. Bills, accounts, paperwork. He handled those things. He would sit at the table in the evenings with a pen and a stack of envelopes, occasionally asking her where she had left something, occasionally shaking his head at a number she didn't quite understand. She never asked many questions. He never offered many answers. It had worked, until it didn't. Evelyn crossed another street, waiting for the light without realizing she had stopped. A group of people stood nearby, shifting their weight, glancing at their phones. No one spoke to her. When the signal changed, she stepped forward with them, moving in the same direction, but not with them. After her husband died, the house had grown quiet in a way she hadn't expected. Not peaceful, just empty. The first letter had come about 3 weeks later. She remembered the envelope, the weight of it, the way her name looked slightly unfamiliar printed in block letters instead of handwritten. She had opened it at the kitchen table. Read it once, then again. It didn't make sense. A balance due, a figure that didn't match anything she recognized, terms she had never seen before. She had set it aside at first, assumed it was a mistake. More letters followed. Different companies, different amounts. All with her name. She had called one of the numbers eventually, sat at the table with the phone pressed to her ear, listening to a voice explain things in a tone that was patient but distant. Accounts, obligations, signatures. Her name was there. That was all that mattered. She hadn't argued. She hadn't known how. The house had gone first. That part had happened quickly, almost efficiently, like something that had already been decided long before she understood it. After that, there had been a period of stillness, a gap, and then Caleb had called. Her son's voice had sounded the same as always, steady, practical. He said there was space, a spare room. It'll just be for a little while, he had said. She had agreed before he finished the sentence. That was 8 years ago. Evelyn reached the next corner and paused again, this time more deliberately. Her arms were starting to ache from holding the cans in the box. She adjusted them, shifting the weight to her other side. The bus stop sign stood just ahead. A thin metal pole with a faded schedule taped to it. The edges of the paper had curled slightly from rain. She stepped closer. Read it. Not because she needed to understand it fully, just to look at something that had order. Times, routes, numbers. A system that moved in predictable lines. Behind her eyes, the years at Caleb's house settled into place. At first, it had felt temporary. She had unpacked only what she needed, left some things in boxes, telling herself she would sort them out later. She had made herself useful. Cooking dinner most nights, keeping the kitchen clean, folding laundry before anyone asked. It felt right to contribute, to not take up more than she should. Dana had been polite in the beginning. Not warm, not unkind, just measured. There had been small comments, nothing direct. Water usage has been a little high this month. We're trying to keep the grocery bill down. Maybe we can all be a little more mindful." Evelyn had heard them, even when they weren't aimed at her. She adjusted. Shorter showers, smaller portions, lights off in rooms she left. It wasn't difficult. It was what she knew how to do. Over time, the comments became more frequent, more specific, less about we and more about presence. She had responded the same way she always did, by making herself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. She ate later than the others, after dishes were done, after the kitchen had settled. She kept her television volume low enough that she could barely hear it. She learned the rhythms of the house so well she could move through it without disturbing anything. It worked. For a while. Until it didn't. Evelyn looked up from the bus schedule. The numbers blurred slightly. She blinked. Refocused. A bus approached in the distance, its headlights cutting through the gray afternoon. It slowed as it neared the stop, brakes releasing with a soft hiss. The doors opened. People stepped off. Others stepped on. The driver glanced out briefly, his eyes passing over her without pause. Evelyn stood there, holding her cans and the softening box, the $2 in her pocket, pressing lightly against her side. She watched the doors close again, watched the bus pull away. Then she looked back at the schedule. Still there. Still waiting. She didn't move yet, but for the first time since she left the curb, she had stopped long enough to consider where she might go. The thought didn't fully form. Not yet. But it was there. Faint. Like something just beginning to surface. And she stood with it, quietly, as the traffic moved around her. A horn sounded somewhere down the block. Not at her, just in the air. Evelyn blinked, and the present shifted again. The bus stop faded into the background of her mind, replaced by something sharper, closer, more defined. The kitchen table. That was where it had started. No, not started. Ended. She could see it clearly now. The way the morning light had come through the blinds in thin, angled strips, cutting across the surface of the table. The way the toast had cooled on her plate, untouched. The faint hum of the refrigerator behind her, steady and ordinary. Dana had been standing already. That was the first thing Evelyn noticed in the memory. Not sitting. Standing. Hands flat on the table. Palms down, as if she needed something solid beneath them. Caleb stood at the sink, his back to the room. Water running. He hadn't turned it off. Evelyn had sat where she always did. The same chair. The one nearest the window. Her hands folded loosely in her lap, waiting for whatever was coming. She had known something was coming. There was a way silence changed before certain conversations. It grew tighter, more deliberate. Dinah had cleared her throat once, not nervously, just to begin. "I've been looking into some options," she said. Her voice had been even, measured, like someone explaining a plan that had already been decided. Evelyn had nodded. A small motion. Encouraging, almost. Dana reached into a folder on the table and slid out 3 brochures. Glossy paper, bright colors, images of smiling older people walking through gardens, sitting in sunlit rooms, holding coffee cups they probably hadn't made themselves. She spread them out in front of Evelyn. "Senior transitional living," she said. "They're actually very nice." Evelyn had looked at the pictures, then at the words. She didn't touch them. They have activities, Dana continued. Meals provided. Medical staff on site if needed. It's a better environment. A pause. For everyone. The refrigerator hummed. The water at the sink kept running. Evelyn turned her head slightly. Not toward Dana. Toward Caleb. His shoulders were still. His hands rested on the edge of the counter, just below the running faucet. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't turn around. Evelyn waited. Just a moment. Long enough for him to notice the silence behind him. Long enough for him to say something. Anything. He didn't. She looked back at the brochures. The images seemed too bright, too clean, like something printed to convince you of something that wasn't quite true. I see, Evelyn had said. Her voice had come out softer than she expected. Dana nodded, encouraged. We think it's the best step forward, she said. There's an opening right now, which is actually really fortunate. Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly in her lap. Right now? She asked. Dana gave a small, polite smile. Yes, they can take you today. Today. The word sat there for a second. Unmoved. Evelyn felt it settle somewhere deeper than the rest of the conversation. She looked down at the table again, at the brochures, at the edge of her plate, at the crumbs she hadn't brushed away yet. I might need a little time, she said. Carefully. Not as a refusal. Just a request. A day or two, just to sort things out. The water at the sink continued to run. Caleb shifted slightly, just enough for her to see the movement. But still, he didn't turn. Dana's smile faded. Not abruptly, just enough to make space for something firmer. I really think it's better to move on this now, she said. These openings don't stay available. Evelyn nodded again. A reflex. She understood urgency. She had spent a lifetime responding to it. But something inside her didn't move this time. It stayed where it was. I just need a little time, she repeated. Donna exhaled slowly, not loudly, but enough. I don't think that's going to work, she said. The words were quiet, no. Evelyn felt them land. She turned her head again, toward the sink, toward her son. He was still there, still facing away, still letting the water run. She watched the back of his shoulders, the slight rise and fall of his breath. She waited again, this time longer. Because this time, it mattered more. He didn't move, didn't turn, didn't say her name. The water continued to run. Evelyn looked back at the table, at the brochures, at her hands. She noticed distantly that her fingers had curled inward. She relaxed them slowly. I understand, she said. Dana nodded once. Relief, maybe, or just confirmation. Evelyn pushed her chair back. The legs made a soft sound against the floor. Not loud, but enough to mark the moment. She stood, left the toast where it was, walked down the hallway to her room. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. Inside, everything was as she had left it. Neat, contained. 2 drawers, a small closet, a bed that had been made that morning. She moved through the room without hesitation, opened the dresser, took out what she could carry, folded each item carefully, placed them into the grocery bag she had used earlier that day, the one that would later tear. She didn't rush, but she didn't stop either. There was nothing to consider, no decision left to make. When she finished, she stood in the center of the room, looked around once, not searching for anything, just acknowledging. Then she picked up the bag, opened the door, walked back down the hallway. The kitchen was quieter now. The water had been turned off. Caleb was gone from the sink. Donna stood near the counter, arms crossed lightly, watching. Not unkind, just resolved. Evelyn walked past her, toward the front door. Her hand rested briefly on the knob, then turned it. The door opened. Cool air moved in. She stepped outside. And then, the rest followed. The bag, the curb, the cans, the quiet closing of the door behind her. Evelyn blinked again. The memory receded. The bus stop returned. The traffic, the sound, the present. Her hands still held the cans and the softening box. Her pocket still held the $2. Nothing had changed. Except now, she understood exactly when it had happened. Not when the door closed, not when the bag tore, but earlier, at the kitchen table, when the decision had already been made, and she had simply followed it. Evelyn looked down at the bus schedule again, then out at the road. The buses came and went, routes leading in different directions. She stood there a moment longer, then shifted her weight, just slightly, as if preparing to move again. Only this time, not without thinking. Evelyn stood at the bus stop longer than she needed to. Cars passed in steady lines. A delivery truck rumbled through the intersection, its brakes releasing in a long, tired sigh. The air smelled faintly of oil and damp pavement, the kind of smell that settled low and stayed there. She looked down at the schedule again. Routes, numbers, names of places she didn't recognize. Most of them meant nothing to her. They were just directions, lines on a map that assumed you already knew where you belonged. Evelyn traced one of the routes with her finger, then another. Her hand moved slowly, carefully, as if something might reveal itself if she didn't rush. And then a name. It wasn't large. It didn't stand out. Just another stop along a longer route. But it caught her. Greyhaven. Her finger stopped there. She didn't move it, didn't blink for a moment. The name sat on the page like something that had been waiting. Greyhaven. She hadn't said it out loud in years, not since before her mother died, not since she had left that place behind without fully understanding why. The memory didn't come all at once. It arrived the way older things did, with edges first. A narrow road lined with tall grass bending toward the ocean wind, the low, steady sound of waves hitting rock somewhere beyond the cliffside, the smell of salt and something faintly sweet, lavender maybe, drifting through an open window. And the cottage. Small, weathered, the paint peeling in places where the sea air had worn it down year after year. It had never looked new, not even when she was young. But it had always stood. Her mother had lived there alone. That was how Evelyn remembered it. Alone, but not lonely. There was a difference. Evelyn had never quite understood it at the time. She shifted her weight slightly, the cans pressing into her side. Greyhaven. The name stayed with her. It didn't push, didn't demand. It just remained. She remembered the last time she had been there. Not clearly, but enough. The drive had been long, quiet. The kind of quiet that sits between two people who don't quite know what to say to each other anymore. Her mother had stood in the doorway when Evelyn arrived. Hands folded in front of her, not reaching out, not stepping forward. Just waiting. That was how she did most things. She waited, and somehow expected you to meet her there. Evelyn had stayed only a few days. She told herself she had responsibilities back home. Work, the house, her husband. All true, but not the whole truth. There had been something in that cottage, something she hadn't known how to sit with. A stillness. A way her mother moved through the space as if everything in it had a purpose she didn't need to explain. Evelyn had felt out of place there. Not unwelcome, just unnecessary. She had left without promising to come back. And she hadn't. Not once. Now the name sat in front of her again. Greyhaven. She looked down at her hands. The cardboard box had softened further. One corner bent inward under the pressure of her fingers. The cans felt heavier now. Or maybe she was just more aware of them. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the 2 crumpled bills, smoothed them again. $2. She glanced at the fare chart posted beside the schedule. The numbers were small, printed in a tight column. Her eyes moved down the list slowly. Local stops, transfer points, regional routes. Then she found it. A route that stretched farther south, connecting lines, transfers. Greyhaven wasn't listed directly. Of course it wasn't. It was too small for that. But the line passed within reach of it. Close enough. She followed the route with her finger, tracing the path from Tacoma down along the coast. The fare sat beside it, $1.90. Evelyn stared at the number, then at the 2 bills in her hand. She counted them again, not because she needed to, because it felt like something that needed to confirmed. $2. Enough, barely. She let out a small breath. Not relief, just acknowledgement. A bus approached in the distance, different from the last one. Longer. The destination sign flickered slightly as it drew closer. Evelyn stepped back from the curb, giving it space to pull in. The brakes released with a soft hiss. The doors opened. A few people stepped off. No one paid her any attention. No one ever did. She stepped forward. Carefully. One hand still holding the cans, the other steadying the box. The steps felt higher than she expected. She placed her foot firmly, lifted herself up, and moved inside. The driver glanced at her briefly. "Where to?" he asked. His voice was neutral. Routine. Evelyn hesitated. Just for a second. Then she said it. Greyhaven. The word felt unfamiliar in her mouth, but not wrong. The driver nodded once. "Closest stop I can get you is about 3 miles out," he said. "That okay?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes." He told her the fare. She handed him the $2. He counted it quickly, returned a dime. She took it, held it for a moment, then slipped it into her pocket beside the pill bottle. The doors closed behind her. The bus moved. Evelyn found a seat near the back, sat carefully, placing the cans and the box on the seat beside her. She folded her hands in her lap, looked out the window. The city began to shift almost immediately. Buildings thinned. Traffic eased. The noise softened into something more distant. She watched it happen without reacting. as if she were simply passing through something that had never really been hers. Hours would pass. She understood that. But time didn't feel the same now. It stretched, flattened, lost its edges. She leaned her head slightly against the window. The glass was cool. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, pressing gently against the horizon. Somewhere ahead, a small coastal town, a cottage that should have been empty, a place she had left behind. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, not to sleep, just to hold still. The bus carried her forward, not quickly, not dramatically, just steadily. And for the first time since she stepped off that curb, she wasn't walking without direction. She was going somewhere, even if she didn't yet understand why. The bus ride stretched longer than she expected. Hours passed in a quiet rhythm, engine hum, the occasional shift of passengers, the soft murmur of someone speaking into a phone near the front. Outside the window, the city gave way to open stretches of road, then trees, then more trees, thicker this time, pressing closer to the highway as if trying to reclaim it. Evelyn watched without really focusing. Her reflection hovered faintly in the glass, a pale outline, a face she recognized, but didn't study. At some point, the light changed. It softened, turned gray in a way that felt heavier than before. The bus slowed. The driver's voice came over his shoulder without turning fully around. Next stop, last one for this route. Evelyn straightened slightly. Her hands moved to gather her things. The cans, the worn box that had held together just enough. When the bus stopped, the doors opened with that same soft hiss. She stood carefully, walked down the aisle, stepped off. The bus pulled away almost immediately, the sound of it fading quickly down the narrow road. And then silence, not complete, but close, the kind of quiet that feels like it's waiting. Evelyn stood on the edge of a small gravel turnout. A single gas pump sat under a rusted metal awning. The station itself was little more than a rectangular building with a flickering fluorescent light inside. A bell above the door jingled faintly as someone stepped out, glanced at her, then got into a truck without speaking. The air smelled different here, sharper, colder. There was salt in it. Faint, but unmistakable. Evelyn turned slowly, looked out past the road. Beyond the thin line of trees, she could hear it. The ocean, not loud, just steady. A low, distant rhythm that moved without stopping. She stood there for a moment, letting the sound settle. Then she looked down at the road. 3 miles, the driver had said. She didn't question it. There was nothing to question. She adjusted the cans under her arm, tightened her grip on the box, and began to walk. The road curved gently, following the shape of the land rather than cutting through it. Gravel shifted under her shoes with each step. The wind moved across the open stretches, lifting strands of her hair, brushing against her coat. It wasn't a hard walk, but it wasn't easy either. Time stretched again, not measured in minutes, but in distance, in the steady rhythm of steps, in the sound of the ocean growing just slightly louder with each turn. She passed a broken fence, a patch of wild grass bent low by the wind, an old mailbox leaning slightly to one side, its red flag rusted into place. The world felt unfinished here. Not abandoned, just left alone long enough to become something else. Evelyn kept walking. Her arms grew tired. The box sagged further, one corner dipping dangerously. She adjusted again. Careful. Always careful. Then, at the bend in the road, she saw it. The cottage. It stood just beyond a narrow stretch of open land, set back from the edge of a bluff that dropped away toward the ocean. The grass around it had grown uneven and wild, patches of it flattened by wind, others standing tall and stubborn. The house itself looked smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she was seeing it differently now. The paint had peeled in long strips, exposing weathered wood beneath. The roof sagged slightly in the center, the edges darkened by years of rain and salt air. One window on the side was cracked, the glass holding together stout enough to stay in place. But it was still standing. That was the first thing that settled in her chest. It hadn't collapsed, hadn't been taken over, hadn't disappeared. It had endured. Evelyn stopped at the edge of the path. Didn't move closer right away. She just stood there, looking. The wind moved across the field, carrying the sound of the ocean up toward her. She took a step forward, then another. The path to the cottage had nearly vanished, but her feet found it anyway. Memory guided her where the ground no longer marked the way clearly. The porch came into view. 2 steps, slightly uneven. The railing leaned outward, just enough to notice. She climbed them slowly. Each step creaked beneath her weight, the sound dry and hollow. At the door, she stopped again. The handle was still there. The same one, worn smooth from use. She reached out, rested her hand on it. Cold, but not unfamiliar. She turned it. The door didn't open at first, not locked, just stuck. She pressed a little harder. The wood gave slightly, then more, until the door eased inward with a soft, dragging sound. The air inside was cool. Dry. Not the damp, heavy air she expected. Evelyn stepped inside. The light shifted immediately. Softer. Filtered through the covered windows. Furniture sat where it always had, covered in white sheets that had yellowed slightly with time but remained intact. The shapes beneath them were familiar. The curve of a chair, the edge of a table. Dust rested lightly across surfaces. Not thick, not undisturbed. Just present. The floor creaked beneath her feet as she moved further in. She set the cans and the box down on the nearest flat surface. Stood still. Listened. No animals. No wind inside. No movement. Only the faint sound of the ocean, steady and distant. She walked slowly through the main room. Her hand brushed lightly against the back of a chair as she passed. The sheet shifted slightly under her touch. She moved toward the window, pulled back the edge of the covering just enough to let in a sliver of light. Dust particles drifted in the beam, slow and quiet. The smell reached her then. Not decay, not neglect. Something else. Dried lavender. Faint. But there. She closed her eyes for a moment. Let it settle. Then opened them again. The cottage didn't feel empty. That was the part she couldn't explain. It didn't feel occupied either. It felt held, as if something had been paused here. Waiting. Evelyn turned slowly, taking it in. Every detail, every quiet surface, everything exactly as it should not have been after all these years. And she understood, without fully knowing why. This place had not been forgotten. It had been left this way on purpose. Evelyn stood in the middle of the room, letting that thought settle, not rushing past it, not explaining it away, just letting it exist. The ocean moved somewhere beyond the walls, steady and patient. The sound came in through the structure of the house itself, faint but constant, like something breathing far below. She turned slowly. Her eyes moved from one covered piece of furniture to another. The shapes were familiar, but the details were not what held her now. It was the condition. Nothing here had collapsed. Nothing had rotted. Even the air felt preserved. Evelyn stepped closer to the table near the kitchen doorway. The sheet covering it was tucked in at the edges, not loosely thrown over. She reached out and lifted one corner. The fabric slid back with a soft whisper. Beneath it, the surface of the table was clean. Not freshly polished, but not neglected either. She ran her fingers across it. A faint line appeared in the dust, but it was thin, even, as if it had settled slowly over time, not layered in years of abandonment. She let the sheet fall back into place. Something tightened slightly in her chest. Not fear, not yet. Just awareness. Evelyn moved toward the kitchen. The doorway framed it the way she remembered. Narrow, slightly uneven at the top where the wood had shifted over the years. She stepped inside. The light was dimmer here, filtered through a small window that had been covered from the inside. A thin line of gray light slipped through the edge, enough to outline shapes without revealing everything at once. The sink sat where it always had, the counter beside it, the cabinet doors closed. Evelyn approached the sink first. She rested her hand on the edge. Cold. Dry. She turned the faucet slightly. Nothing. She expected that. Still, she turned it back carefully, as if it mattered. Her eyes moved to the drawers, one in particular, to the right of the sink. She paused. A memory surfaced. Not a full one, just a feeling tied to that exact place. Her mother standing there, reaching into that drawer without looking, pulling out something she needed without hesitation. Evelyn reached for it, pulled it open. The wood slid smoothly. Inside, the items were arranged neatly, not scattered, not forgotten. Utensils, a small pair of scissors, a folded cloth, and beneath them, a notebook. Evelyn frowned slightly. It didn't belong to the memory. She reached in and lifted it out. The cover was plain, dark, worn at the edges, but not damaged. She opened it. The first page held a date, not from decades ago, from years after her mother had died. Evelyn's fingers stilled on the page. She read the entry. Short, precise. Repaired window latch, west side. Below it, another date. Another entry. Supplies delivered. Paid cash. Her eyes moved down the page. Line after line. Dates, notes, small details. All written in the same steady hand. She turned the page. More of the same. Weeks, months, years. Evelyn flipped forward. Faster now. The entries continued. Consistent, deliberate. She stopped on a page near the middle. Her thumb held it open. Her breath slowed. This wasn't possible. Or, it wasn't supposed to be. Her mother had been gone for years. Decades. She knew that. She had accepted that. But this said otherwise. No, not otherwise. It said something else, something she hadn't considered. Evelyn closed the notebook slowly, held it in both hands. The room felt different now. Not empty, not quiet, occupied. But not in the way she had first imagined. Not by presence, by intention. She placed the notebook carefully on the counter, then turned back to the drawer, looked again. Her eyes scanned the contents more closely this time. Not just what was there, but how it was arranged. Everything had a place. Nothing was random. She reached for a receipt tucked beneath the folded cloth, pulled it free. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges, but the ink was still clear. A hardware store, not local. The date matched one of the entries in the notebook. She checked another, and another. Each one aligned. Each one supported what she had just read. Evelyn set the receipts down beside the notebook. Her fingers moved slowly now, deliberate. She wasn't just looking, she was comparing, checking, confirming. The way she used to at the dental office, when something didn't quite match the chart, when a number felt off, when a detail refused to sit right. She had learned to trust that feeling, even when she couldn't explain it yet. Evelyn turned back toward the main room. Her eyes moved across the covered furniture again, then to the hallway beyond. A thought began to form. Not complete, but clear enough to follow. Someone had been here. Not recently, but not long ago either. Long enough to maintain, to repair, to keep things from falling apart. But careful enough not to disturb anything, not to change the structure, not to alter the space, just preserve it. Why? Evelyn walked slowly toward the hallway. The floor creaked under her steps. The sound echoed slightly in the quiet house. She reached the threshold, paused. The hallway stretched ahead, narrow and dim. At the far end, a door, closed. The same door, the one she remembered, the one that had always been there, the one she had never opened. Her gaze fixed on it. Something in her chest shifted again. Stronger this time, not fear, something closer to recognition. She didn't move toward it yet, not directly. Instead, she stepped to the side, examined the wall, the frame, the floorboards beneath it, looking, noticing. Small things, details that might have been missed before. The kind of details she had spent a lifetime quietly correcting for others. Now, she was seeing them for herself. And something about them didn't add up. Not yet. But enough to know. This door wasn't just closed. It had been kept that way. On purpose. Evelyn stood in the hallway, her eyes fixed on the door at the far end. The light here was thinner. It slipped in from the main room behind her, stretching along the floorboards in narrow bands. Dust caught in it, drifting slowly, undisturbed. She didn't move at first. She let her eyes adjust, let her breathing settle. The door looked smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she had grown used to making it larger in her mind. It had always been there, closed, unexplained. Her mother had never locked anything else in the house. Not the cabinets, not the back door, just this one. Evelyn took a step forward. The floor creaked beneath her foot. The sound carried down the hallway, soft but clear. She waited. Listened. Nothing responded. No shift in the house. No change in the air. She took another step. Closer now. The surface of the door came into view, wood worn smooth in places, darker near the handle where hands had touched it over time. Her hand hovered near it. Not touching. Just there. She remembered standing in this same spot as a child, smaller, looking up at the same door, asking what was inside. Her mother's answer had always been the same. Nothing you need, not harsh, not secretive, just final. Evelyn lowered her hand slightly, looked closer. Something caught her attention, near the edge of the frame, just above the handle. Faint marks. Not deep enough to be obvious. Not random either. She leaned in, tilted her head slightly to catch the light. There. Scratches. Small. Worn. As if they had been made long ago and softened over time. Evelyn lifted her hand again, this time touching the wood beside them. Her fingers moved lightly across the surface. Tracing. Not pressing. Following the pattern. It wasn't straight. Not like damage, not like wear. There was a shape to it. A sequence. Her brow tightened. She stepped back half a pace, looked at it again, then turned, walked back into the kitchen. The notebook sat where she had left it. Open. Waiting. Evelyn picked it up, flipped through the pages again. Slower this time. More deliberate. She wasn't just reading. She was searching. Her eyes moved from date to date, looking for repetition, for patterns, for something that echoed what she had just seen on the door. A number appeared. Then again, a different entry. Another. Not obvious, but present. She stopped on a page, ran her finger along the line. October 14th. Supplies, West Fence. She flipped forward. October 14th. Seal window edges. Again. Same numbers. Different years. Same pattern. Evelyn's breath slowed. She flipped back, checked earlier pages. There it was again and again. The same sequence. Not every page, but often enough to matter. She closed the notebook gently, held it against her chest for a moment, thinking. Then she turned back toward the hallway, walked slowly this time, the notebook in her hand. When she reached the door again, she looked at the scratches with new attention. Not just shapes now. Numbers. Faded. But there. She counted them. One by one. Matching them silently against what she had seen in the ledger. Her hand moved toward the handle. Paused. The lock sat just below it. Simple. Old. Not reinforced. Not hidden. Just there. Evelyn looked at it for a long moment. Her mind moved through the pieces, the entries, the dates, the repeated sequence. Her mother's voice, distant but steady. Nothing you need. She adjusted her grip on the notebook, then lowered it to her side. Her other hand reached forward, rested on the lock. Cold metal. Unchanged. She turned it once. Nothing. She expected that. She stepped back, looked again. Then she tried differently. Not guessing, not rushing. Following the pattern she had seen. The one that had repeated. The one that had been written down, over and over, without explanation. Her fingers moved carefully, deliberately. Each turn measured, each adjustment small. The mechanism inside shifted. Barely, but enough. Evelyn stilled, waited, then turned it again. A soft click. So quiet she almost missed it. But she didn't. She felt it. Through her fingertips, through the stillness that followed. The lock had opened. Evelyn's hand stayed where it was. For a moment longer. She didn't move the handle yet. Didn't push the door. She stood there, listening to the sound that had just happened, as if it might echo again. Confirm itself. But the house remained silent. Steady. Waiting. Evelyn exhaled slowly, then lifted her hand, wrapped her fingers around the handle. It felt the same as before. Worn, familiar, but different now. Because this time, it would turn. She pressed down gently. The latch released without resistance. The door shifted inward slightly, just enough to reveal a thin line of darkness beyond. Evelyn stopped, her hand still on the handle, her body still. She knew this moment. Not from memory, but from something deeper. A point where things could remain as they were, or change completely. She had spent most of her life stepping back from that line, letting things remain, letting others decide, letting doors stay closed. Her grip tightened slightly, not with force, with certainty. Then she pushed. The door opened, slowly, without sound, and the darkness inside began to take shape. At first it looked like nothing, just a deeper shadow beyond the threshold. Evelyn didn't step in right away. She stood where she was, letting her eyes adjust the way they had in the hallway. Slowly, patiently. The faint light from behind her reached into the room just enough to outline edges. Not furniture, not anything familiar, something else. Flat surfaces stacked, organized. Evelyn took one step forward. The floor inside didn't creak the way the hallway had. It felt firmer, more deliberate. She paused again. Waited. Still nothing. No movement. No sound except the distant ocean unchanged. She reached her hand out slightly, brushing the wall beside the door as she moved further in. The surface was smooth, cooler than the rest of the house. Another step. The shapes became clearer. Shelves, built into the walls, from floor to nearly the ceiling. Every inch of them filled. Boxes, folders, stacks of paper bound together with twine or clipped neatly at the corners. Evelyn's breath slowed. This wasn't storage, not the kind people forgot. This was arranged. She turned slightly, letting more light spill into the room from the open door behind her. It caught the edge of a table near the center. Cleared. Intentional. As if it had been used. Not recently, but not abandoned either. Evelyn stepped toward it. Her hand hovered over the surface before resting lightly against it. Dust was there. But again, thin. Even. Nothing disturbed in a long time, but nothing neglected either. She turned back to the shelves, reached for the nearest box. It was labeled. In handwriting, she recognized instantly. Her mother's. Clean, steady, block letters. Coastline. North section. Evelyn swallowed. Her fingers tightened slightly as she lifted the box. It had weight. Not heavy, but full. She carried it to the table, set it down, untied the string. Carefully. The paper beneath was stacked in neat groups. Documents, photographs, maps. Evelyn lifted the first page. A map of the coastline. Detailed, marked with lines in pen. Sections circled, notes written in the margins. Coordinates. Measurements. She frowned slightly, turned the page. Another map. More markings. This time a section near the cliffs. Lines drawn outward, notes about erosion, distances recorded. She set the map aside, reached for the photographs, black and white, then some in color. Images of the shoreline, taken from different angles at different times. She could see it immediately. The change. The land had shifted. Not naturally, not slowly. Sections cut away, barriers removed, structures appearing where there had been none before. Evelyn leaned closer, studied the edges, compared one photo to the next. The same location, different years, marked clearly on the back. She checked the dates, matched them to the maps. They aligned. Exactly. Her fingers moved faster now. Not hurried. Focused. She reached for the next set of papers. Letters, typed, official, addresses from agencies, county offices, environmental departments. Each one requesting review, reporting damage, citing violations. Evelyn scanned the responses. Short, dismissive, insufficient evidence. Further review not warranted. Case closed. Her jaw tightened slightly. She turned to the next set. More letters. More attempts. More documentation. Each one more detailed than the last. More precise. As if her mother had adjusted each time, refined her approach, added more proof. Still, the same outcome. Ignored. Evelyn stepped back from the table, looked around the room again. The shelves, the boxes, all of it. This wasn't something done once or twice. This had taken years. Careful work, quiet persistence. She moved to another box, this one labeled simply Permits. She opened it. Documents stamped with official seals. Copies, applications, approvals. But the dates didn't match what she had seen in the photos. Structures approved after they already existed. Permits issued for land that had already been altered. Evelyn's brow furrowed. She set the papers side by side, compared them, checked the signatures, the timelines. The inconsistencies stood out immediately. Clear. Undeniable. She exhaled slowly. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't neglect. It was something else. She turned again, looked deeper into the room. Another stack. This one smaller, tied with a different string. Neater. She brought it to the table, untied it. Inside. More letters. But these were different. Handwritten. Not sent. Not addressed. Drafts. Each one beginning the same way. A clear explanation. A direct statement of what had been happening along the coastline. Evidence attached. Arguments built carefully, line by line, and at the top of the last one, a name. Her name. Evelyn Mercer. Her hand stilled on the page. The letter wasn't finished. It ended mid-sentence, as if it had been interrupted. Left that way. Waiting. She read the last line again. Then again. Her chest tightened. Not with fear, not with confusion, with recognition. Her mother hadn't been hiding something. She hadn't been protecting herself. She had been documenting, building, preparing. Evelyn looked around the room once more, at the shelves filled with years of quiet work, at the maps, the photographs, the letters that had gone unanswered, at the unfinished one bearing her own name. This had never been meant to stay hidden. It had been meant to be found. But not by just anyone, by someone who would understand it, who would see what others had dismissed, who would notice the details, the inconsistencies, the truth that sat beneath all of it. Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly around the paper, then relaxed. She placed it back on the table, carefully, exactly where it had been. Then she stood there, in the center of the room, the quiet pressing in again, the ocean still moving beyond the walls. And for the first time since she stepped off that curb, she wasn't standing in something that had ended. She was standing in something that had been left unfinished and waiting. Evelyn didn't move right away. The papers lay in front of her, quiet as the room itself. Maps, letters, photographs, every detail her mother had gathered, held on to, refused to let disappear. Not because anyone had asked her to, not because anyone had listened, but because she believed it mattered. Evelyn reached for the unfinished letter again. Her name at the top didn't feel strange anymore. It felt expected, like something that had always been hers, even when she didn't know it. She looked around the room once more. All those years, her mother had been here, noticing what others overlooked, holding on to something no one else thought was worth keeping. And she hadn't waited for permission. That was the part Evelyn felt the most. All her life she had stepped back, made space, let things pass over her because it seemed easier that way. But standing here now, she could see it clearly. Her mother hadn't lived that way. She had stayed. She had watched. She had kept going, even when no one answered. Evelyn folded the letter carefully, not to put it away, to carry it. Then she turned toward the door she had just opened. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't trying to leave quietly. She was deciding what to do next. And maybe that's the part no one ever tells you, that sometimes the thing waiting for you isn't a place or a person. It's the moment you finally stop asking if you're allowed to be there. She stepped out of the room, the door open behind her. And for a second, she paused. Not because she was unsure, but because she knew something had shifted. Then she kept walking. So let me ask you, how many doors in your life are still closed just because you never thought to try the handle?